Welcome to another episode of Cal's Corner Radio here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show, of course, is the one and only Rob McConnell. Welcome back, and I think this is the third episode we're doing now in not the post-pandemic era, we're still in the pandemic era, whatever that term would be. All right, as you know, the purpose of Cal's Corner is to cover everything from, uh, you know, politics to the paranormal, which is a wide variety of subjects. Tonight, we're going to talk about a couple of different things that are actually not related to each other, but yet, because they're at some point they actually are, because it's reached a point in society where things have become so polarized, and it doesn't really matter what some of these subjects are. And I'm going to give one quick example here because once again, I went through this exercise with somebody, and I've used this all my life, ever since I understood this basic concept of polarization as a young boy. Real quickly, try this exercise yourself, and then we'll invite our guest. And our guest tonight is Melissa Martell. She's going to join us. She also has her own podcast, which is dedicated to cults. We're going to talk about Antifa, the elections, how it's impacting the United States and Canada. And Melissa is an expert on Antifa. Trust me, she'll let her speak about that. Anyway, let's start this with a simple exercise, which I would encourage everyone to at least try with anybody they think this should be done with. Try it on regardless of what the subject is. It could be something that's really emotional or important to the other party. Here's the exercise you do. Ask the other person, hey, what's your favorite color? They'll say, whatever. Let's say red. You say, okay, you know what my favorite color is? It's blue. Pick whatever color it really is. Be honest. We're not playing games. But what we're going to do is a little conversation, very short and sweet, that illustrates the point and one of the key reasons for this show. So after the other person says red in this example, and you say blue because it really is your favorite color, ask them, hey, are you mad at me because I said blue? They'll say, of course not. Now, if the person is mad at you because you said blue, you should probably leave immediately. You've proven my point. But, okay, then you say, well, do you want to punch me because, I didn't say red? No. Well, do you think I hate Trump because I didn't say red? Republicans like to use red, right? No. Use a couple different examples here, and the person will say, why are you doing that? Who cares what color you like? That's the point, folks. So if I say something against President Trump or anybody else, as long as it's factual, even if it's my opinion and I'm wrong, I'm entitled to make mistakes and be wrong. Does that mean I automatically support Joe Biden? No. I remember the days in my short life when it used to be that way in the normal life, but it's not that way now. Suddenly, if I have to wear a mask because the governor says we must do that, it's, suddenly a freedom of whatever issue. It's ridiculous. No, the issue is the mask and whatever. So we become so polarized over everything. And I remember this happening to me as a young kid. The moment I started solving cases like the Meyer case, all of a sudden I'm whatever, anything but the truth, just trying to figure out what the truth was. And in this election especially, a lot of people are undecided, but yet they're also thinking, well, I might not be happy with either choice. I'd rather have somebody else, but somehow we just can't make that happen or refuse to make it happen. So I'll choose for the lesser of whatever. Polls indicate that 60% of Americans now, that would be a majority for those who don't understand math, just don't want either party. And they say point blank in the latest survey, it was just released a few days ago, that they feel that both parties don't represent them anymore. And they don't live in the world they live in. And it's going to get a lot worse in November because even in the so-called booming states like Nevada, well, Las Vegas now, folks, leads the U.S. in unpaid mortgages or rent. 10% of the people now officially, God knows what it is unofficially there in Vegas, cannot make their payments. And it's going to get worse in November and December. And the election, of course, is early on that. Now we have issues where President Trump gets accused of supporting right-wingers, even though he condemns it. But let's be honest, he hasn't done a consistent job about doing that. And the other side, the Democrats, well, they're hypocrites on the issue because remember when they were saying, no, 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 we shouldn't shut down Chinese travel because of this virus? That's racism. Nancy Pelosi goes to Chinatown, does her photo op. There's a Hug a Chinese campaign. Yes, folks, there really was in New York by the wonderful guys running the pandemic management there now. It just was one disaster after another. Both sides politicized it. You got hate groups in there now. You got Trump people going to watch the election. Last episode showed evidence in an expose in the Washington Monthly that there's some games going on both sides. You know, this is really bad stuff. And now Facebook has banned QAnon. Well, will Twitter do it? And then will YouTube? And then what happens to Putin? Is he going to lay off his hackers in the GRU? Will China reassign their 50-cent army to go hack something else? You couldn't make all this stuff up. And with that totally winged introduction, I want to segue now to my guest, Melissa Don. She knows a lot about a certain group, which is more than just an idea. It is an entity, but it's not monolithic, but it's dominating the news. It has for years, and it should. They're, to be honest, declared as terrorists. They have been for years, officially and unofficially, and we're talking about Antifa. And with that introduction, I want to introduce to you Melissa Don, and we're going to talk about Antifa, this election, how she has observed not only how they operate, but what is the truth about them, who, what, where, why, when, how. And I'd like to, with Melissa's permission, she doesn't know I'm going to say this, and that's fine. Near the end of the show, I want her to break down for me how she sees the methods they use to do their thing. Because cults and other similar entities, the cause is just a detail, folks, I promise you, are the same. And people need to know these tricks to help protect themselves, their children, and our overall society. So, Melissa, I'm done being long-winded. Let's talk about Antifa.
Thanks for having me on the show, Cal. I don't know if I'm a specialist or an expert on Antifa. I just have personal experience with them. And so this idea that they're just an idea or just a concept is kind of humorous to me.
Okay. I want to clarify something, and because I don't want anybody using this excuse for what I said. And this is not a reference to you. These are for people who play games, whoever that is. When I say expert, you know, you say, well, the person can't be an expert because they don't have a degree, they didn't write a book, whatever. Yeah, right. Well, from my own personal experience, that's irrelevant. It's what you did, what you lived, what you went through. So for every Antifa expert out there that is a high-paid talking head, God knows somewhere, they don't know anybody who's really involved in it or was romantically involved with anyone from Antifa and so on. So they don't have that personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
So you do. So that's why I refer to you as that. And I want it to be very clear to anybody listening to this that you have been on the front line. These academics have not been.
Right. Well, and I mean, probably about 5 years ago, I wouldn't have even known what Antifa was. I wouldn't have known what an anarcho-communist was, but I got into a relationship with somebody that seemed like just a normal guy from England, you know, and he was involved in some of the similar things that I was looking at. And, you know, I had no idea what kind of mess it was going to be. I couldn't have even guessed. And so it turned out, like, as I lived with him and the more I knew him, because he was very sweet and very nice at first, you start to realize he had addiction problems and mental health issues. And then I realized, looking through a lot of his stuff and his pictures and his history, that he was very anti-police and anarcho-communist. And then this Antifa thing. And I was like, well, what's Antifa? And he was like, what's anti-fascism? I'm like, well, that's good. Like, that's like your normal reaction. Like, well, at least he doesn't like fascists. That's a good thing. And that's probably how most people see it that's out there, right? Like, most people are like, well, what's wrong with it? And I've had people say that. And I'm just like, there's a couple of things wrong with it. And it's that probably not just...
Melissa, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem.
Before I lose this thought for the question here, now you became involved with this gentleman and you started to realize over time some problems. Now, when you said that you've learned about Antifa, the name, he explained what it meant, which sounds noble, like the cause BLM, Black Lives Matter. Of course, Black Lives Matter. But when you really look at what that means and how certain parties mean it, as the expression goes, the devil's in the detail. Was this something that when you first found out about his leanings with Antifa and so on, before you discovered they weren't quite noble, was it that you knew this right up front, or was it something you discovered when you opened a briefcase you shouldn't have or something? You know what I mean? How did
Yeah.
you?
I
Yeah,
mean,
okay, okay.
it was just something that I discovered along knowing him. Like he would have like the anarchy sort of A on his
Mm,
profile stuff, and he would start talking about things or
mm.
his comrades.
Comrades.
I'm
Yeah.
not kidding. They use the word comrades. They're their
Okay.
comrades,
Of
or
course.
he would talk about how he would go up to northern England and have meetings with anarcho-communists, and they had to be very secretive about these kind of meetings because it wasn't well received. And then I would learn things about how he would riot in the streets in England, in Bristol and stuff, and smash up businesses. Like probably, I think there was an organized campaign there where they went around and smashed up actual businesses because, from his perspective, the government was subsidizing and the businesses were getting all this money and hardly paying anything to the workers. So they had to, that was fascist or that was bad. So they had the right to go in there and smash these businesses up. And they coordinated it, I think, using BlackBerry phones. And there
Hmm.
was also a lot of chaos right at this time in London. And they would regularly say they were marching against fascists because they were calling basically people who were, patriots of England fascists is what they were doing. And so they would go in and they would what would they do? They're all dressed in black and they'd go in and they'd
Hmm.
smash these buildings, he says, and they'd cause all these problems. And then they would just sweep into the businesses in the bathrooms, discard or change their clothes or throw them away and get into civilian clothes and walk out and just walk away.
Hmm. Okay.
And they were using those old Blackberries, where they were
Yeah.
really hard to bust and decode, I guess.
Yes,
So
especially if it was some years ago. Yeah,
yes,
BlackBerry, despite losing market share and pretty much out of existence because of iPhone and Android, they had the secure server. And you're right about that. So he would do this in England. I assume, based on the way you described it, you also remember or saw some of these events in the news. If that was the case, was it like, oh my God, that's the guy I know, or that's the guy I'm involved with, or whatever the situation was?
I think how it was is the way he explained it was like he was defending the workers, and I was like, oh, okay. Like I was with him, and then when I thought about it, I'm like, but you just smashed up the businesses. What? Like it was like, and I start to learn more about how they thought because he would say things like paradox of tolerance, Melissa, paradox of tolerance, and I'd be like, well, what is that? And
Hmm.
basically, what Antifa believes is you don't have to tolerate the intolerable. So you can be intolerable to something that you view as intolerable. And
Wait.
so
Okay, so you, or meaning you can be tolerable to something you say is intolerable.
no, you're supposed to not tolerate it.
Okay, if you,
It's a so yeah, you're supposed to if something is intolerable, to
yeah.
get rid of it, you cannot tolerate it, so you have to be intolerable towards it to get rid of it.
Oh, I
That's
see.
how they think. Do you
Okay.
understand? Like it's a paradox.
Yeah, I
And
do.
they would
Okay.
use that he would use that paradox to back up what they were doing as if they were actually as if there were all these fascists everywhere all around and they had to go get them, and I'm like, well, where are they? And he would insist that they were there, and I'm like, you're smashing up businesses, like what? And that's when I start to realize that they actually viewed, because of the anarcho-communism, a lot of them go to these meetings, that they viewed the whole entire system as fascist and it had to be
Hmm.
taken down. And
I
that's when I was
understand.
like, oh wow, I'm like, that's a mess.
Okay, so not all fascists are created equal in this one group. All right, we're hitting near the 15-minute mark for the first segment here, so we're going to wrap it up for the first commercial break. But we'll continue to talk about this and explain how this manifests into very real events that people see now so that they can understand them further. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the second segment here on Cal's Corner Radio Show on the X Zone Broadcast Network. Once again, my name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. The executive producer of the show is, of course, Rob McConnell. My special guest this show, and I'm really honored, is Melissa Dawn. She has her own show, of course, called Deprogrammed. Prior to that, she was doing Secret Door podcast. She has firsthand experience with what it's like to interact with and be in contact with people who are associated with different cults, Antifa being one of them, of course. But let's be clear, Antifa is not the same as the Billy Meyer UFO sex cult. That's another show, another topic entirely. Not all cults are created equal. But I want to share one little piece of trivia for your cult-loving fans out there. Do you know that the small country of Switzerland has, now they've reached a new infamous milestone, they have over 10,000 cults? Hello! So now the Swiss government is like, I think we need to take this more seriously. So we'll get back to you on that issue because the timing, folks, I promise you, couldn't be more cosmic. All right, let's get back to something more important, Antifa. Melissa, welcome back. I'd like to pick it up from where we had talked about this seemingly stupid thing of intolerance and tolerance. So let's say you tried to work this out as a mathematical equation. It would cancel each other out unless I missed my math, and it would be zero. So basically, it seems like it goes from being, I'm not going to stand it, I can't stand it anymore, to I'm just going to use any excuse I want to do what I want, and it's really anarchy hyped as justice, social justice, warrior violence theme.
Well, and then where does it end? I mean, if they start being intolerant to you because they view you as intolerant, does that give you permission to be intolerant back? And what do they mean by intolerance? Apparently, they don't have to tolerate you. That means like kill you, burn it down. Like, where does it end?
Well, it ends with a lot of people dead, and unless people rise up and stop it, it either burns itself out after causing more chaos needlessly and death and destruction, or it ends up becoming institutionalized and it ends up being some government at some point. There's plenty of tyrannical governments out there. You know, I must say real quickly, in my travels abroad, in the different countries that I was into, as I went around for nearly 20 years, I was shocked. I never felt it was right for groups like the Ku Klux Klan and the American Nazi Party. I don't understand why they have the right or had the right to protest and march, death to Jews or whatever. And they're like, well, that's freedom of speech. Okay, but, hatred is not protected free speech. The courts have been very clear about that. That's also true in Canada, I assume, where you're at. So what do you think about the United States being Canadian, and what do you think of Canada itself? And I don't know any of the hate groups in Canada. I don't profess to know. I don't study it. I know there's Antifa everywhere, especially, in the West. What do you think when you have these groups that are allowed to, under the banner of freedom and democracy and all that, to openly espouse hatred? They're protected in that sense. They just got to get a permit to do it. Now contrast that to, say, the Czech Republic, which was occupied at one time, given over to Adolf Hitler in exchange for peace in our time. We saw how that worked out. In there, you can't display the swastika. If you do, or any symbol of hatred, and they have a list, swastikas on there, you can go to jail. If you deny the Holocaust, it's 3 years in prison. That's an EU law. And David Irving, who ironically unmasked the Hitler diaries, proved they were hoaxes, ended up spending time in prison because he ends up denying the Holocaust. You couldn't make that up if you were Hollywood. Yet in Prague, every year on the anniversary of Kristallnacht, of all things, the destruction of Jewish property and the mass arrests and sending them to Dachau, the first concentration camp, they march. I have been in the old Jewish quarter helping volunteer protect some of those neighborhoods for a couple years in a row. And I thought it was pathetic that we had to do that. And I'm looking at real neo-Nazis here, mostly are skinheads. In their instead it's a German national movement. They don't use the word Nazi. They don't have the swastika, but it is the same dang party. They would exterminate all the Untermenschen, the Jews if they could, the Slavs, all the stuff Hitler wanted because he is their god, so to speak. But they're really atheists. They don't believe in a divine anything. So compare that to what you see in the West. And what do you think is the answer or how it should be handled? Or do you think the way that we handle it in the West and glorify them in liberal media is the right thing to do?
Well, I think they're focusing too much on the symbol and the what they think it's going to look like instead of focusing on the actions and the words. So if someone is doing actions and words that are saying violence against a group of other people, then you need to act on it. Outlawing symbols is ridiculous because all that I have to do is just create a different symbol, right? And get a charge behind that. The symbol itself isn't the problem. It's the actions and the beliefs and the ideology, and the actual intention of violence. That's the problem. In Canada here, I mean, hate speech, the term hate speech is so vaguely defined. I mean, it's considered hate speech if you accidentally misgender somebody now. So
Misgender.
that's,
Wait.
yeah, yeah,
Misgender. Is that the term in Canada? Because I
yes,
haven't heard it as an American yet.
yeah.
Here, yeah. Okay. Just
Yes,
wondering.
yeah. So like if I call you he and you actually think you're a Z, you could go to the board of whatever and file a complaint on me if you want, and it would go through a kangaroo court, and you could say that's hate speech because it offended whatever. And that's a possibility. I mean, whether or not it's successful, I don't know.
Mm,
It's been
mm,
tried, but it's a possibility.
mm.
Now in the United States, I mean, I'm not American, so I'm not going to tell America what to do, but if somebody is actually saying something and doing something are two different things. So it's like, where do you draw the line? You don't want to get stuck on symbols, and that's just too rigid and narrow because that's never, I mean, it's like I mean, they tried to put restrictions against Germany and don't have guns, and they did a lot of stuff after World War One, and it didn't stop anything. It didn't stop them from rising up again. So I think they're going about it the wrong way by looking at it in terms of hate speech. Obviously, you shouldn't be able to build up violence and aggression against people, but how do you prove that? I mean, they have to actually say it and threaten it. It's a hard line to define.
I agree. It's hard, but let me just elaborate on something. I should have mentioned this little caveat here. When I was in Prague, I love the fact that the swastika was banned.
Hmm.
So as I'm wandering around looking through history, because I love history, and World War II is one of my favorite time eras, and I'm looking at stuff that's still beautifully, perfectly preserved and all that. I'm finding swastikas openly displayed in antique shops. So I asked the owners, I said, how can you do it? And all my friends are telling me you can't do this. They said because we sell historical stuff. If you're, wearing, it for a fashion thing, no. And then, ironically, when I lived in India, and of course being Jewish, on the neighboring balcony to me to the left, I took photos of it because it was like, what are the odds? There's a swastika to the left of me, which was actually facing the way the Nazis did it instead of the opposite way the Hindus did it, because it's not a Nazi symbol. It's quite an old symbol. It's actually meant to be good luck and all that. But I thought it
Hmm.
was ironic that here I am, a Jew, living next to a Hindu swastika that's flipped around like a Nazi, not because the neighbor's a Nazi, but he thought it looked better the other way. He just didn't put the four dots on there, you know. So I
Right.
guess that's the new chic version of it. And then so anyway, in Czech Republic, I'm up at the castle and I'm seeing the Soviet Union communist symbol. So I said to the vendor, I said, "How can you display this? Stalin was not a nice guy, especially to you guys too. But Hitler's not allowed. He's not kosher, but Stalin's okay." Well, it turns out that Russia still had such control, still do. They own Karlovy Vary and other towns. Signs are in Russian there too. That they won't go there. And so their definition is squirrely because the Soviet Union symbol and communist symbol is not considered hatred there. There's actually members of parliament who are members duly elected by the people, voters, who are members of the Communist Party. And their symbol is a white dove flying for peace with cherries, two cherries hanging out of its mouth, left and right of the beak. And it's like, talk about a Trojan horse, you know. And so many young people support the Communist Party because in that country, they vote for them if they don't like the other two parties, which are like the Democrats and the Republicans, in the West. So they vote for the communists. And I keep telling them, one day you're going to get your wish and you are in trouble at that point. But that's the way it's heading. Look at urban in Prague, Hungary. He's a mini tyrant there, but he keeps getting reelected. So in the West, you say, well, what drives it? Well, I would argue that if somebody's marching against a race like black people or Jews, they're members of the Klan, they got their hoods on. The Klan is not about brotherly love. Its very
Mm-mm.
existence is racist and hate fueled. So why should they be allowed to even say anything when hatred itself is by law not protected free speech? That's my understanding of it. I don't understand how both can you can I don't understand how both can be okay.
Well, in that context, I don't think it's okay. Like if they're marching against another group, I mean, that would be considered like an intention of violence, in my opinion. I mean, the thing is like, how do you stop people? How do you stop people from hating another group, right? Like it's like that has to be explored because why do they hate that other group in the first place? It's pretty deep psychology, and like with Antifa, why are these people marching up against their own culture that they feel like it's a horrible place, but yet it supported them and they live in this culture. They actually live a pretty comfortable life, most of them. It's like it's a deep psychology, and I'm sure it's different for every individual that's in Antifa. Like my ex-partner, he
Hmm.
was just probably a lot of these young people that just got this empty void in them, and they just hop from cult to cult, from place to
Hmm.
place, looking for a place to belong and take charge of the world because they're not very successful. My guess is that's probably part of the reasons why you can get people to join these hate groups, is they feel like they're empowered suddenly, and this big gap in their lives where they didn't have love or they were abused, they're just filling it up. And that's my guess, is this gives them a place to belong and a sense of power.
Well, because of in your part of Western Canada, how would you describe, if there's a way to describe it, Antifa overall, for lack of a better term, in your neck of the woods? Or, I mean, you live in an area that has no apes, but Bigfoot's protected, I think, or something like that. How would you describe Antifa in your area?
I've never seen Antifa in my
Okay.
area functioning. I know it's down in Portland.
Okay.
I know it's down in Seattle and a lot of places on the West Coast below me, but I've never actually seen an Antifa organization on where I actually live. I only became aware of it because I was with this person from England. And so I
Mm-hmm.
realized that it was functioning in England, well at the beginning of, the 21st century. So, and I knew that Germany also had an issue with Antifa too, like doing different riots and stuff against Nazis or supposed Nazis. And so they're not new. I just think that there's some kind of something new happening now where they see fascism where it isn't.
Yeah, everything they want to destroy, like you said, is suddenly like the old religious nuts. Oh, they must be a witch or part of the devil, so go kill them. Whatever excuse. Reminds me of the Crusaders when they would massacre Jews just living in Jerusalem when they finally breached the walls. That was not very Jesus-like of them. And of course, the real religion tenets is they would never condone that, but you could never tell the Pope that sent the army to massacre everybody. So it's really bad. As you know, for example, Facebook has now made a decision to ban QAnon, and they have started to release some statistics on how that is immediately impacted. Of course, the numbers are far greater because who knows how many friends of friends of friends each of these groups have. And with privacy settings, you can't always see what those numbers are. But it's a huge development that the biggest online social media platform is now saying to QAnon, you're no longer going to use us as a tool, at least now. Who knows? Now there's the issue of will Twitter follow and then YouTube? And at that point, that would be a huge choke off. So we'll discuss that when we get back after the break. And then I'd like to, pursue the other part about methods that you see that they use. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the third segment here on Cal's Corner Radio Show and the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. The executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. Now, our guest tonight is Melissa Dawn, and we're talking about Antifa and some of the nonsense or chaos that's going on in today's world. And no, I'm not talking about the pandemic. I'm talking about people just being, I don't know of a single adjective, because not all people are this way, thank God. But just this idea that a police officer does something wrong or illegal on somebody, regardless of who they are, and that means suddenly, because you're angry that they did that and what they did was wrong, you can now go pick on somebody and harm them or burn their house down or loot their store because, the Air Jordans are vital to peace and stability in this world, and so on. And then, of course, you can burn and loot things and take over neighborhoods, and it's all good because, right to free speech and protest, okay? Well, I'm not the oldest guy on the planet, of course, but I do remember growing up in the 60s and 70s, and in my short life, the chaos that I saw and the flower power, hippie movement, burning of Watts and all that, growing up into a world where Kennedy had been assassinated and how that impacted my life, blah, blah, blah. And I look today at what's going on, and it's just lunacy, even among sane, rational, logical people. And I'm going to give you one quick real example, and then I'm going to ask Melissa to share some very real examples. She probably has more than I do recently. Here's an example. I've always believed that all lives matter, because they do. And I've understood that since I've understood basic science, okay? So all lives matter means what, folks? Quiz time. It means automatically that Black lives matter, white lives matter, pink lives matter, green lives matter, whatever color you want to use. And most of my friends, in my case, don't live in the U.S., and they're of color. And I hate that term because white people only make up about 5% of the world population, let's be real. And let's be honest, if Jesus existed and Adam and Eve, they weren't white looking like Thor. That's racism. In fact, the earliest known painting of Jesus is actually in the Orthodox side in Russia or Greece, I think. And he's black. No surprise, Jesus was a Jew. He wasn't even a Christian. So there we just inflamed a whole lot of people who just don't understand history. And this has nothing to do with anybody's religious beliefs, but it is somehow relevant today to what's going on today. So you have the masters of peace, meaning people who are real historic figures who changed and transformed history because of their love for peace and furthering peace. Men like Martin Luther King. His idea that there's one color, or no colors, meaning it's one race, human. Did people attack him for that view? Yeah, racists and haters did, or people who didn't understand him. Well, I have always believed, and I can't credit Martin Luther King for it, I credit science for it because I understood science before I even knew who Martin Luther King was. Science was the first thing I kind of was exposed to at, age 5 and all that. Okay, so I understand that there's one race, human. Okay, do you look at a dog and say, well, he's a black dog, he's a white dog? No, we don't classify people the way we do dogs and stuff. We have one race, human. Your color of your skin is genetics, where you live, environmental factors. We all know this. And even racists know this, okay? But yet racism still persists. So would Gandhi say, hey, go burn that building down because, this guy acted badly? No. In fact, Gandhi said, if we literally enforced an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, as the Bible commandeth, Moses' biblical Judaic law, yes, Jewish law, everyone would eventually be blind. And Gandhi's right. So, yeah, the Old Testament says kill homosexuals. It's in there, folks, written thousands of years ago, supposedly by Moses. Do they do it today? No. Do they kill gays in Israel? No. In fact, if you're gay, Tel Aviv is one of your favorite towns. So things have changed. But you wouldn't know that today based on what you see that passes for peace. Buildings get burned down. Mayors don't do anything to protect their citizens. And now they're moving to states that don't want this. You can't blame them. So I'm going to share with you one quick incident, then I'm going to turn it back over to Melissa because she absolutely has some fascinating stories that are true. In the state of Nevada, Antifa was coming here, Black Lives Matter. They're going to do something together. And they'd already sieged downtown Reno, burned buildings. I saw some of the damage there physically. Some of those businesses are gone now. They moved out. The police wouldn't let them burn the police station. That's what they tried to do. So word came out that they were going to attack Carson City. Let's skip Reno. Didn't succeed there. Let's go to Carson City. Well, what happened is, and I talked to the woman who told me this, gave me the details. I know her. She's not lying. She got a message from the Hells Angels of all people. And I'm not a fan of the Hells Angels, but you know what these Hells Angels did? They got on their bikes, and what they did is they just went ahead and rode into Carson. She joined them, and they stood there, and they faced down these haters who were there in the interest of peace to possibly kill people, but at least burn and destroy buildings. It doesn't work that way, folks. And they realized that they couldn't take on the Hells Angels, who said, get out of here because you ain't going to do it here. Go somewhere else. Nobody fired a shot. They left. These Hells Angels were armed, open carry, legal here in Nevada. If you have no crime, you can just buy a gun, get your background check while you wait. Depends on where you get it. Walk out and hallelujah. That's the way it is here. Well, they got a taste of that. And I support that. That was America. That was people saying, you're not going to use crime to further peace because you can't do that. It doesn't matter what the subject is. Einstein said that the only reason evil exists in this world, and he's right. This is Einstein. He said it's because good doesn't do its job often enough. And that's true. So with that little diatribe aside, turn it back over to Melissa. Melissa, I want to share, if you don't mind, please share with the listeners here some stories you have, very real stories of trying to get people to not believe in some of this stuff or think that, you know, the earth is flat or whatever analogy you want to use that leads to things like Antifa and the hatred and the racism and so on.
Well, I mean, a lot of people don't believe that Antifa is bad because they're caught up in the name anti-fascist rather than looking at the actions. And you've got so much disinformation online. You'll have people say, well, it's actually the right wingers and the neo-Nazis. They're dressed up as Antifa, and they're not. This stuff that they're doing, this is what they do. Hook, line, and sinker. So it's hard to get them to see that because people are caught up in titles and logos and labels. That's why I originally said not to get caught up in a symbol, to look at the actions, because don't get caught up in the name. Don't get caught up in a corporation's name, because there's often a nice mask in the front trying to tell you what they think they are. Like you said, it's a Trojan horse, but the intention inside is really messed up. And, you know, like the ex-partner used to always view this stuff as like he's justified. And I suppose he thought he was good, like you just said, like he thought he was good and doing good work. But I think there's a hysteria. Like they have a hysteria. And I've experienced, just when I'm trying to talk about it or posting stuff on Facebook, people actually calling me a fascist now. I get that a lot.
Why are you a fascist? Just so I wouldn't want to confuse you with someone who's not a fascist. So why are you a fascist?
Because I'm calling out Antifa and saying I'm actually comparing them to the brown shirts. I'm actually comparing them to the actions of early fascism, like whether it's Mussolini or Hitler. I'm saying, hey, look, they're actually going around and targeting people. Whether they think it's for their skin color or whatever, whether it's BML, they're actually targeting their businesses and destroying their livelihood with like this idea that they're righteous and they're able to, and they're actually being supported by politicians and celebrities. They're actually being supported by mainstream people to do it, and it's really disturbing. And if you can't see that they're doing that, you're actually supporting it too. Like, that's what I'm saying. And they're like, Melissa, don't you know they're Antifa? And when I argue back about BLM and Antifa, I'm told, well, clearly, obviously, you are the fascists and you support fascism. And these people haven't got a clue what they're talking about. They just don't know that what this ideology is representing. They are just unaware, and I guess I could be mad at them, but then I just realize, oh, they're watching CNN, they're watching CBC or the BBC, they're watching you. If I type in Antifa right now on the internet, it's going to be mostly good stuff about them. They're not actually going to tell you what they do because it's such a cellular like group. There's no organization, there's no church like Scientology that you can point to and say there's the leader. It's very like guerrilla type organized, and it's very sporadic all over the place. People meet at other people's houses or they sleep on couches, and there's a lot of couch surfers and people in and out involved in it. It's not the same organization. So people can't point to it.
Yeah, it's not monolithic, but I think there's an accurate analogy because in this Secret Wars project for years I've been working on hatred, extremism, and terrorism. My PhD thesis, I have to decide which school I'm going to finish this thing at. I argue that there is no difference, and I've said this for years, between a terrorist who wants to kill you because you don't believe in their strain of Islam or whatever, Al-Qaeda as an example, or ISIS, versus a Bigfoot hunter, as I discussed on your show recently, who also wants to kill me because we found the guy who wore the Patterson Bigfoot film and recreated it for National Geographic, and they broadcasted, excuse me. It's ridiculous because if you want to harm somebody just because they don't agree with you or they won't convert to what your belief set is, regardless of what it is, that is not religion. That is extremism. That is fanaticism. It's dangerous. It's a national security threat. It's a threat to the very fabric of society itself. My God, if everybody kills everybody because they disagree, there's nobody left. So I don't understand why the bad guys are the ones who point this out, expose it, try to get others to see it, and then suddenly they're evil. It's ridiculous. So in my mind, Antifa, it's maddening to see Joe Biden and the Democrats say, oh, Antifa is not a real group. It's an idea. Well, yeah, it's an idea and an ideology, but it has cells like Al-Qaeda. It's modeled after terrorist groups. Al-Qaeda isn't even an original idea. They've been fighting that kind of war using different terminology ever since Islam itself split, over 1,400 years ago, the Shia-Sunni schism. And Al-Qaeda, not everybody went to the Church of Bin Laden. Everyone said, oh, I'm Al-Qaeda, I'm ISIS, whatever. And they were just, okay, I'm ISIS, now I'm going to go kill somebody. And then ISIS, oh, we had a member named Abu Jihad, we didn't know that. Okay, yeah, what the hell, that's all good. We endorse it. They weren't connected, they weren't talking to each other. And that includes the terrorist in Paris who went on rampages in Europe off and on throughout the years. So I'll tell you, as a journalist, like you said, it has shocked me and disappointed me. Shame on them. I wish they could be held accountable. When you can watch all the major news, except the so-called radical network Fox, which isn't that simple, and you'd never know there's anything bad about taking over neighborhoods and rioting for months, that's fine. Just like those arsonists they arrested for starting the fires. Climate change, excuse me, it's not that simple. So you got the media in there, you got Putin in there, you got Iran, you got China working the internet. You got this cluster, what going on. So as we wind up this segment here, I'd like you to think about this if you can. What advice would you give as somebody who has had firsthand experience with these? You've also dealt with people who claim to channel the Pleiadians. That's not Billy Meyer, to be specific. But same problem. It's not grounded in reality, whether it's Pleiadians or climate change or whatever. It's not real. So I want you to think about what advice you'd give to people to try to separate fact from fiction out there because, hey, everyone's one click away from the truth, right? So think about that during the commercial break, if you will, and then we'll come back after this commercial break here for the final segment. Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on Cal's Corner Radio on the X Zone Broadcast Network. Once again, my name is Kal Korff. I'm your host, of course, and Rob McConnell is the executive producer. By the way, I need to say this now because if I don't, it'll be too late, literally. But I think, unless I'm wrong on the math, thanks to Rob telling me actually a couple episodes ago, I think this is episode 99 as after we relaunched from the Middle East in United Arab Emirates. Had a great time there, was there several occasions, and I have even magic secret photos I'm going to publish later of Israeli planes over there and all that secret stuff that went on before it became official recently after a delay, after a couple of years that they have formal relations now, and that's only going to go forward. We'll cover that in a future show because real quickly, the entire Arab world, the Sunni side at least, led by Saudi Wahhabiyya, is going to effectively recognize Israel. It doesn't matter who the next president is. It really can't be stopped. And that leaves the Shia side, led by Iran and practically no one else, to either get a clue or remain deservedly isolated. It's big news. Bahrain, all these guys are climbing on board, even Qatar, which likes to play both sides of the pond. And the project to go ahead and make a canal on the border of Qatar and Saudi Arabia is moving ahead because it'll make the Strait of Hormuz irrelevant. And that means there'll never be another boat seized. That'll be cool. Anyway, lots of exciting stuff. We'll come back to that as it's, after the election. That's all lined up in the pipe. But anyway, we launched this show 99 episodes ago. And the next one on episode 100, with Rob's permission, of course, I want to kind of recap some of the stuff we've done because I think some of it deserves to be recapped. And then, of course, we can relink to some of those shows. All of that's on iTunes and Spreaker and all kinds of places Rob puts this. So anyway, I'll talk to him and we'll try to make it happen. Also, I got real quickly my copies of the Wendell Stevens book, The CIA's Conspiracy Against Wendell Stevens. I got 12 copies today, thank you. And my Annie Jacobson copies are due to arrive. That's great. I'll be talking with Rob about that later on his show. Look forward to that. And thank you, Rob, for that invitation. And I will be posting video, sending a copy of the Wendell book to the CIA director and their Department of Public Affairs and other places I know. They're letting them know that this is the truth about the CIA conspiracy. They might want to know that. And ask them when they're going to declassify some more stuff. Anyway, we'll see. All right, I'll keep you posted as that goes on. It's available, both books from Amazon.com. Get them now before everybody else does, I guess. Anyway, all right, Melissa, welcome back. Melissa, we live in a world today where if it's on the internet, it must be true, right? So what is some advice you would have for someone trying to navigate through this? Because you just hit the nail on the head in the other segment. They Google Antifa. What's Antifa? Oh, they're peace guys. Cool. Wow. Black Lives Matter. Yeah, I understand that. Good cause, theoretically. We should not be racists. Okay, I understand that. Yes, there is racism. There's disproportionate. Racism is disproportionate anything because it shouldn't even exist. Everybody should be equal. We're all humans. There's one race, human. Even Nelson Mandela said that. He said only a fool would divide people into color and races. He's right. But if you say that now, you're a racist. It's really ridiculous what the left has done. They're not progressive. They are regressive. So how does somebody separate this stuff when suddenly the definition of racist is you disagree with me, or as I personally encountered in Prague, you don't like Barack Obama, so you're racist?
Yeah, I think we need to know right away that the left has moved so far to the fringe faster than the right has, so that there's a lot of doublespeak going out there. It's really, and it can be really confusing. But I think you need to actually be aware of your media and your news and realize that there are corporations and rich people who have agendas behind them. And when you're watching TV, I think people need, or anything, people need to be aware that someone's got a camera and they're pointing it somewhere where they want you to see, and they're telling a story that they want you to believe is true. Whether that is true or not is like debatable. And so you need to go out and look at multiple sources. You need to look at conservative sources. You need to look, even if you think they're distrustful, you need to look at smaller journalists on YouTube that are on the street filming this stuff. And you need to get a whole bunch of different voices, not just one voice or one network, because if a lot of money is involved, in my opinion, the truth is probably going to be not the most important part of their agenda.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're right, absolutely. But let me ask you this, and I'm asking this question not to be, disagreeing because I agree, but and not that my opinion matters, but I'm asking this question next because this is what I think I see out there that the average person is going to face. So we know that 90% of the media is owned by essentially a handful of companies, thanks to the interests of competition and approved by the Democrats, Republicans in America. So Disney, owns, ABC and things like that. Disney owns a lot of things, Marvel, all that stuff. All right, so fine. So, like you said, they search on Google and they see whatever, and it is good news or nothing that condemns them, but yet it's only Fox that does. So now the average user says, well, out of the top 10 Google hits here, Fox says these guys are bad, they're terrorists. The other guys don't even say that word. In fact, they say that, if you try to say all lives matter and you don't support Black Lives Matter, you must be a racist. Even though you say all lives matter and the person understands what the definition of all still thankfully means, it hasn't been hijacked by the left yet. So how do you fight that? Because they're looking on the internet, they're depending on it, yet that's what they're going to see. And Google swears, oh, that's not our fault. We're not
Well,
stacking the deck.
stop using Google. First off, I would use something more like DuckDuckGo. I mean, there's smaller people. There's people on YouTube who talk about this reality all the time. Like people are going to have to get off of TV networks and big corporations and start looking at people like Tim Pool, who is a progressive who actually criticizes stuff. Start listening to Joe Rogan or start listening to smaller people who are actually talking. They actually have fairly big audiences, but they're not owned by a corporation or a big money person. They're not paid by lobbyists. They're not interacting that way. People need to get into this new paradigm where you're not depending on even Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC, because they've
Mm,
gone down a path. They're just so awful. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, and you have to realize that Google is definitely stacking the deck in Antifa's favor. Why they want to, I can't necessarily say. I don't have any evidence why they would, but you have to change the way you think about media, and it's these big corporations are not where the truth is at, and you just have to look for little people or come to Cal's show or go to, my podcast. That's where people are actually saying honest opinions unfiltered.
Yes, yes,
I
in
mean,
fact.
and let's not forget a lot of the magazines. I mean, a lot of the people who have learned this ideology have learned it in universities and colleges. They've learned Marxism, and nobody thought it was a big issue. Antifa, whatever they've learned in colleges, but now they're out and they're getting jobs. They're getting jobs writing in Teen Vogue. They're getting jobs writing for all these newspapers and stuff like that. They're getting jobs in these companies like Spotify, and they're
Mm,
pushing this narrative, and they believe it. They believe that for some weird reason, they don't like freedom of speech. So you have to realize that it's actually a really big problem. Like it's probably overwhelming. I'd say always question ideologies, and if don't abandon your friends and family because their stuff doesn't agree with you. That's a big mistake.
hmm
A lot of people who get in with these ideologies will stop talking to their friends. That's dangerous. That's cult behavior.
I
You know.
agree. I agree. Yeah, I agree. I will tell you that ever since I announced I've canceled my Trump expose book, I've had, I think, 11 people unfriend me on Facebook, and I've blocked 2 people. And I don't care. I really don't. I don't care if anybody is my Facebook friend because I don't have my open public Facebook page for the sake of having friends. Now, the only reason I have my Facebook page is because Bill Marriott, who unfortunately is no longer alive, set it up and gives me a password and says you need to do this and a bunch of other stuff, and like, okay, fine. And of course I've been a multimedia head forever on the hypercard team and all that before there was an internet, but I thought this is kind of, I don't have time for this, and it's kind of redundant in my case. But I'm telling. I've come to appreciate it only because I've reunited with people I never would have. And what's funny in my case is my teachers who remember me turning in 200-page reports and being on this show and doing all this stuff that is Kal Korff, for lack of a better term, that these people who stalk me say it's not true, but even though it's all, documented many decades ago, and they're still alive, there, and they can be asked any time, they don't get any things like, well, was this really true? Because these people are cowards and they're not going to run it down, and they can be taken out anytime and exposed. And the one thing that hit me in all this, revisiting some of this stuff, like the Wendell Stevens book, which I'd forgotten I'd written when I was young, that's my fault, is the way I had to write it now, factoring in today's culture of safe space and shaming, is okay. I couldn't put a lot of footnotes in there because that's too intellectual for the Twitter generation. So instead, I had to write it in a way where it was clear that you couldn't argue with this, like showing the slide in my hand of Jim Lorenzen or whatever at the time. We're sitting there together and they're alive running APRO. So don't tell me I wasn't there. Here's secret surveillance photos of Wendell's house. Never been published before. Blah, blah, blah. So don't tell me it didn't happen. And if someone still believes that it didn't happen and it's right there, I'm done. That's it. It's a waste of electrons to even on that person anymore. And I think it needs to reach that point, or something must be online or consumable in whatever flavor Johnny Consumer loves his data, where this is there and people know the truth because of it. And, they get the truth. And they don't have that now. They have Google, and it's causing parts of the problems. So, we've been talking, I assume that you would agree with this. I assume you're going to continue your deprogramming efforts and your informing people, letting them know the truth. Are you planning to do anything forward as far as anything on Antifa specifically?
Oh, I'm sure it will come up. I mean, they're so not self-aware, this group and this ideology. I mean, just like you said, they want a safe space, yet they're out creating chaos and the most unsafest conditions for people out there. They're just so not aware. I can't see me not covering Antifa or bring it up. I don't want to spend too much time on there, but I mean, it is cult-like, and a lot of the people who are in Antifa will often jump to other cults. They'll go and they'll be in like a vegan cult. They'll show up in Hare Krishna. They'll jump around and they'll do different groups because I mean, like I said, a lot of them, the sad thing about Antifa is they target people who have mental health problems or who are mentally ill and are easy to manipulate and are looking for somewhere to belong and are just not mentally well.
Okay, I was not aware of that. I'm happy they've been declared terrorist organization. Same with the Ku Klux Klan and all that. About time. But it's going to get worse before it gets better. Real quickly, we're got about another minute roughly. What do you think when rioters get out of control and they're allowed to just be out of control for months or weeks, and the mayors let them do it?
No, it's inappropriate. There has to be a consequence, and they have to know that if they're going to do this, they're going to spend 10 years in prison or something like that. If there's no consequence, it's like a child. If there's no consequence, they'll just keep pushing the ante, and that's the problem with progressivism. It never ends until there's no rules at all, and it's chaos.
It's really anarchy and anarchy in a Trojan horse thing.
Unfortunately, progressivism always ends this way because where do you stop? You get all your rights, you get gay rights, you get these rights, so you have to keep going until it's like basically they want no rules at all, and there has to be consequences.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, but let's also distinguish it has become a generational thing, because I certainly remember I used to be a progressive, but back then we stood on principles, and now they're moving the goalposts everywhere. Folks, thanks for joining me. Thank you, Melissa, so much. We'll be back next week, hopefully for episode 100. Thanks for joining me. Take care.